All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to explore a really fascinating and honestly, a pretty radical new way of looking at the world called Zyro Hive. The core idea here is that all those massive problems we see, ecological crises, economic instability, they don't come from where we think they do. It might all boil down to a single, deep flaw in how our systems even see the world around them.
I mean, you've probably felt it, right? You look around and you see all this incredible technology, all this wealth and power, and yet things just feel off, like they're stuck, or even sliding backwards. What is going on?
Well, the Zyro Hive framework has a surprising answer. It argues the root cause isn't necessarily what we always blame. Not corruption, not incompetence, not some secret plot. It's something much deeper, something baked into the very structure of how our institutions perceive reality itself.
And that brings us to the central metaphor of this whole thing. Our systems aren't broken, they're blindfolded. They're suffering from what's called sovereign blindness. Basically, this means that the big players running our world, corporations, governments, they have all the power to act, but they can only see a teeny tiny sliver of the actual consequences of their actions. And this is how it breaks down. Everybody is stuck in their own lane. In energy utility, they're geniuses at managing electrons on a grid. But the health of the watershed their power plant depends on? Nope, that's what they call an externality. It's invisible to them. A big corporation is a master of capital, but the living, breathing cultural patterns it might be destroying, that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. They're all laser-focused on optimizing their one little piece of reality, and in doing so, they're accidentally wrecking all the others. So if the problem is that we're all blindfolded, then the solution has to be about learning to see again. But to do that, we have to first understand what it is we're not seeing. And Zyro Hive says there are 5 completely different but interconnected scales of reality that our current way of doing things just totally misses. We've got to start at the very bottom, at the foundation of everything, the microbial scale. This is the invisible world of intelligence in our soil and our water that literally powers all life on this planet. But to our markets, it's just dirt. It's an expense to be managed or a place to dump our waste. We've completely missed that it's the source code of planetary health.
Okay, one level up from that, you've got the microscale. Just think of this as the scale of patterns and relationships. It's the natural logic of how a watershed flows. It's the unique rhythm of a local economy. It's the wisdom that's passed down through families and traditions. These are the things that give a place its character, its identity, its resilience.
Next up is the mesoscale. This is that middle layer, the regional level, where different systems are supposed to connect and complete each other. We're talking about supply chains, regional power grids, the shared culture of an entire area. Right now, we mostly see it as a logistical headache, but it's actually where incredible symbiosis and cooperation is supposed to happen. And now we get to the one we all know, the one we hear about every day, the macro scale. This is the big stage of global finance, national economies, huge infrastructure projects. And in our current blindfolded world, this is pretty much the only scale that anyone thinks is real. But here's the kicker. Because it's so isolated from all the others, it's actually starving. It's cutting itself off from all the real value and resilience that those other scales provide. And last but not least, we have the metascale. This is the biggest picture you can imagine. It's the deep, underlying beliefs, the paradigm of our entire civilization. You could call it the operating system that runs the whole show. It's the stuff we usually brush off as philosophy, but it quietly sets all the rules for the entire game.
Okay, so we have these 5 hidden scales, and our biggest institutions are blind to pretty much all of them. So how do we fix this? How do we build a new architecture that can actually see the whole picture?
Well, the answer isn't some single, all-seeing organization. It's more like building a new kind of eye that requires a trinity of different players, where each one acts as a unique lens. You need the industrial utility, you need something new called a pattern contributor enterprise, or PCE, and then you need a critical integrator, the Prosperity Co-Creation Corp, or PCC. Together, they create one clear vision. And this slide just perfectly illustrates why you need all 3. On their own, they are half blind. The big utility, they get the macro scale stuff, the grid, the finance. But the microbiology health of the soil, the local culture, totally invisible. Then you have the pattern contributor enterprise. Think of this as maybe a local co-op or a group that holds deep traditional knowledge of the land. They see that living world with perfect clarity, but they have no idea how to talk about it in the language of global finance.
And that's where the third piece, the PCC, becomes the absolute linchpin. Think of it as the universal translator. It's the bridge. It creates a shared protocol, a common language, so these two different worlds can finally talk to each other. It helps the utilities see that restoring a watershed isn't a cost, it's actually an asset that makes their grid more reliable. It fuses their two partial views into one coherent picture.
Now, I know this all sounds pretty abstract, right? So let's bring it right down to earth. Zyro Hive proposes a really concrete first step to prove this whole thing can work. It's called the Genesis Ignition. It's about taking our very first peek through this new collective eye.
So here's how it would work in the real world. Imagine a utility company has to spend, say, $100 million on a new solar farm. The old, blindfolded way is to just find the cheapest piece of land and slap some panels on it. But the new way, the seeing way, is to ask a whole different set of questions. Where can we put this solar farm so it also helps restore the local watershed? And so that it honors local cultural wisdom? And so its success is literally measured by how healthy the soil microbes get. You see? You're stacking benefits across all the scales.
And this is where it gets really mind-blowing. Every time you make one of these connections, it feeds into a learning system called Carly. Now, this isn't your typical AI. It's more like a shared optic nerve, or a collective brain for the whole system. It starts learning the relationships, how placing solar panels in a certain way affects soil moisture, which affects what local farmers plant, which then changes when people use the most electricity. The system literally gets smarter. Its vision gets sharper with every single project.
So what happens when this kind of seeing isn't just a one-off project, but becomes the new normal? Well, it completely flips our economic logic on its head. It shifts us from an economy based on scarcity to one based on genuine abundance.
Think about it. Our current blind economy is fundamentally a zero-sum game. To create $1 billion of value on the macro scale, we might destroy billions in unseen value on the microbial and micro scales. We book it as a profit, but for the system as a whole, the net result is scarcity. A seeing economy, on the other hand, is multiplicative. When you create value at one scale, it actually amplifies and multiplies the value at all the other scales. The net result is real, system-wide abundance.
Okay, let's put some actual numbers on this, using our solar farm example. The initial investment is $100 million. Now, in the old blind system, you'd be lucky to get a 10% return. But in a seeing system, that same investment also improves watershed health and soil health and the local economy, and it even starts to shift the whole paradigm. And as you can see here, each one of these benefits doesn't just add to the total, it acts as a multiplier on all the other value being created.
So when you actually do the math, when you multiply all those benefits together, that $100 million investment doesn't create $110 million in value. It creates nearly $250 million in total systemic value. This isn't some kind of financial trick. This is the real, tangible wealth that was there all along, just hidden from us, waiting for us to finally develop the eyes to see it.
And this really brings us to the core message that Zyro Hive has for the leaders of our institutions. The problem isn't that you're evil or that your systems are broken. The problem is that the market has forced you, for decades, to wear a blindfold. You're just doing your job, optimizing for the tiny slice of reality that you're allowed to see, while unknowingly causing damage to the vast reality you can't.
And that, really, is the question this leaves us with. This isn't about tearing everything down and starting from scratch. It's about removing the blindfolds from the powerful systems we already have. The potential for regeneration, for incredible prosperity, for true abundance, it's already here. It's just waiting for us to make the choice, to open our eyes and finally see it.